As some of you might be aware, in June there was a festival on Steam where developers released a legion of demos for players to test out. A view into the future, it let us try out games we might be interested in, games we might have thought died on the vine, and games we were almost certainly going to play anyways. I wanted to share my favorites, but because of who I am as a person, my filtering process boiled down to, does this look cool? And is this indie? And is this based on Pinocchio in some way? So as a result, this list is coming out significantly after the NextFest ended, to the point where some of these games have actually launched. I need better time management. It's tough living in a world of responsibilities when all you want to do is be a little mushroom who bounces on flowers.
In the lost Caribbean Sea was a captain mighty.
So there are two things I dislike about Shadow Gambit. The first is this. The second is this. Okay, we're good. Shadow Gambit, the Cursed Crew, is such a fun idea. Take Pirates of the Caribbean. Now flip the script so the cursed pirates are the good guys. The bad guys are a set of inquisitors determined to cleanse the abominations, and we all know how that goes in the end.
Abomination!
A real-time tactics game, Shadow Gambit has you building a team of cursed pirates to take on missions throughout the Lost Caribbean, whatever that means. Actually, I'm not sure what it means to be cursed in this game, though it seems to have something to do with undeath and black pearls and holy people hate them, you know the way.
The cursed must be brought to a fiery pit.
The three playables are a woman with a sword permanently stuck in her chest, Aphia, the ship's doctor, who is mostly vegetable by this point, Sue Lady, and the ship's cook, a skeletal sushi ninja, whose name escapes me as I record this. There's a lot of lore buried in here, and I really hope the devs plan to expand on it, because inquiring minds have gotta know. Game-wise, your characters possess tools and skills that let them get the drop on an enemy that heavily outnumbers them. The typical loop has you entering a scenario, analyzing the enemy's movements and patterns, and then coming up with a plan. This means picking off enemies piece by piece, and trying to avoid a Metal Gear-inspired manhunt when you boneheadedly forget about that other sentry. No, the other sentry. You know it's good, because you can rewatch the trailer and pick out all the mechanics used in-game. It's perfectly feasible in real time. There is some room for improvement. That map term mechanic I had mentioned earlier is tied to the Alt key, and that makes it really unwieldy. The pirates also respond differently when they're in groups than when they're solo. Like, for example, if you tell two of them to take cover, one might just stay standing. And this got Sulady killed so many times. Though the game's incredibly generous autosave really lightens that load. Maybe a little too much at times. And I can't stay mad at them, because characters in Shadow Gambit are just fountains of personality. They chat during missions, they praise each other, they mock each other, they boast about their own achievements.
Ever tried swimming with a sword through your chest?
No, but I can swim with one arm and no meat on my bones.
Hell, they even set up their own sections of the ghost ship, which is an actual ghost, by the way, to reflect their trade. Even the skeletal decorations have something to say. Just don't get stuck in a conversation with old Gertrude.
I don't think you heard me. I'm just playing along. Yes, I'm Mordecai.
What is this? How did they do this? What sorcery made this possible? Viewfinder is a puzzle game where the rules of reality are made up and the points don't matter. Well, there are rules, but they are very easily broken. The game starts in the tutorial room, which does a great job of hiding the fact that it's a tutorial, teaching you all the mechanics you need to know with barely a button prompt. The key feature here is taking pictures and putting them in the real world. When you do, the space pictured becomes physically present. A picture of a bridge becomes a bridge, a picture of a battery becomes a battery. It's not completely without limits. Each photo has a background that appears off in the distance. Anything between the foreground and the background is completely annihilated, so if you're not careful, you could actually destroy your goal. They have a lot of fun with this in the early level too, showing that more than photographs can be realized. Pencil sketches, watercolors, Looney Tunes, and even a Doom map become fully 3D environments to explore. In retrospect, a 3D Doom map is not all that impressive.
You could say I was stretching my creative muscles.
But the real meat of the game comes when you get a hold of the Viewfinder, a camera with limited film that can take Polaroid shots. These photos can then be turned into new, explorable areas. As an amateur game developer myself, with a modest knowledge of game design and object-oriented programming, this is witchcraft. For sheer ingenuity, Viewfinder is my wishlist best of show. Oh, and there's a story in the background about 4 people getting married or something. I don't know. I didn't really follow it.
Hiraya, my love. Please, hold still.
What do I even do with my hands?
I mean, who would have guessed I'd be interested in a game about climbing a mountain? Jusant, meaning low tide, starts you off as a young sandbender boy and his pet alien walking across a desert wasteland. Though, actually, it's not a desert, it's a dried-up ocean. Probably. At first I was sure the tone it was going for was post-apocalyptic, but as I started picking up clues about the world's state, I became unsure if that was the case. I said mountain, but really this thing is more of a stone column. It's hard to believe it came about naturally in this state. It reminds me of a volcanic geyser, which is probably the inspiration. When you start poking around, you find signs of habitation, and whoever lived here was all about the water. Buoys, boats, and flotsam are everywhere, as are notes from the people who once dwelled there. There's definitely some concern in these notes about water, but it's not being described in survival terms. More of a problem than an apocalypse. One of the letters is from a woman leaving home to go on an adventure to find more water, one she has a reasonable expectation of returning from. They don't seem like desperate people, and the fact that the kid made it so far suggests settlements exist down on the surface. They do reference the Jusant, but whether this was a surprise or an expected development, they don't say. Gameplay reminds me a bit of the VR game The Climb, which was beautiful but bad for the wrists, especially when you accidentally punch the floor. A game like Jusant is going to live or die based on how interesting its climbing mechanics are, and so far, I'm satisfied. Each face that needs to be scaled is a bit of a puzzle, and our protagonist has multiple tools which demand their own level of mastery. If the devs can maintain that through the whole game, then they could have a real gem on their hands. There are a few inconsistencies, times when I wanted to jump but the game said no, the swinging mechanic seems to be not there, and I had one soft lock where the game couldn't decide where I was and figured I wouldn't notice if it took all my controls away. Still, I'm looking forward to seeing what's on top of this mountain. Straight talk, I don't know what the hell this was. The game starts with an absurd personality profile in which the central antagonist, I think, uses to build a dungeon tailored to you. What follows is utter zaniness from start to finish, and I want to see more. This isn't really a demo for Athenian Rhapsody, despite the title. It's a side story meant to give you a sense for how the game will play. Again, I think. And what we have is a game that takes the bits of absurdism from Undertale and dials them up to irritable bowel syndrome. I could have prevented this, by the way, and instead I only made it worse. It really does feel at first like this game is trying the Undertale-like scheme, which is mostly like the Earthbound scheme. The characters in this demo don't have the kind of charm Undertale's does, and I didn't spend a lot of time on them. Why are a walking fish, a squirrel, a religious fly, and a satanically hungry cat all part of this dungeon? In this case, they're kidnapping victims, but it's hard to imagine a world whose context makes sense of these beings. So why was it a favorite? Well, first is the combat. It's basically Undertale's, but the bullet hells are in full color and a lot of fun. I'm glad more developers are trying this. The second is the message. Yes, I was surprised to learn there was a message in all this nonsense, but it kind of worked. Skip the next part if you want to avoid spoilers for an hour-long demo. All through Athenian Rhapsody, the wizard and failed Kirby impersonator Thunder Goober taunts and encourages you. By his own admission, he's unhinged. He'll alternatively encourage you to kill people or befriend them, seemingly on whims. I started out trying to spare everyone because in Undertale that was the most fun. But as less and less likable characters started challenging me, I found the dialogue options less enticing. By the time I fought Thunder Goober, I'd gotten so sick of games of tic-tac-toe and spelling challenges and being called foolish that I just punched him clean in the face, surprising both of us. The lesson, as Thunder Goober says, is that some people are jerks. Which is kind of true. Not every Flowey has a sad Asriel dreamer inside them. Some people are mad dummies and there's not much else to be done if they get in your face. In the game's final moments, he tells you that Athenian Rhapsody is not a game about judgment, but of expression, which is kind of a nice way of giving you permission to be a jerk yourself if you want. And God help me, I want to play it and find out if he's right. The demo was unhinged and too weird for its own good, but this also isn't the same world as the game. So if Top Hat Studios can pull it off, they might have a game to equal Undertale's narrative depth, if likely not its popularity. So, starting this list, I intended to play every demo to completion to get the full scope. But my friends, this is not like the demo discs from official PlayStation magazine. These things go on for hours. So I set a limit. If the game can't impress me in 30 minutes, then it doesn't get a place on the list. 30 minutes into Back to the Dawn, I decided that 60 minutes was a better number. I'm not a big fan of prison stories. The concept is scary to my sheltered middle-class upbringing, and the main character Thomas Fox, or Bob Black Panther I guess, is living my nightmare. He's a reporter framed for drug possession and sentenced to 3 years in prison. Seems he was making life a little too hard for the mayor's ruthless campaign manager, who decided to put him out of the way until after the election. Funny that we got 2 prison-based RPGs this month. Space Prison didn't really grab me. Generic main characters are kind of an odd choice in JRPGs, making it hard to latch onto the guy. The setting was so utterly grim it had hope as a game mechanic. That's a tough meter to keep topped off when you're serving 150 years in hell for speeding. So I put off Back to the Dawn for a bit, unsure if I would get the same situation. But I underestimated Metalhead Games. You start off confused, disoriented, and a little nervous. Likely the reaction of any first-time prisoner. How do you avoid making a misstep? Well, they're charitable here by giving you an even-keeled donkey for a roommate who readily accepts your friend request. Not everyone is like that, and not everyone is a good friend. Seriously, why am I always hitting Lovecraft references in my game choices? But the other prisoners aren't obstacles, they're characters. They have their own drives, wants, and concerns. Needs that might align with Thomas's, or who may be threatened by his actions. 3 gangs run this prison. The Sharptooth Gang is made up of predators and control the basketball court, a game requiring speed and agility. The Bigfoot Gang controls the weight pit and are made up of big muscular herbivores. They're nothing next to the Black Claw Gang, though. They control the general room, and to even go inside, you'll have to bribe them with at least $20, which they'll make you earn by doing quests for a ghost in a barbershop. Maybe. And when you get inside, pool tables, foosball, a library. As Thomas says, it barely looks like a prison room. This was where I realized that Back to the Dawn was going to have layers to it, and where I decided to take a chance and try to strike a deal with the Black Claw leader. There might be a future for me in this organization. You know what? Give me a weird concept, and I'm sure to run with it. In Born of Bread, your main character is Loaf. One night, while preparing dinner for an irritating queen, the royal baker is approached by a man and given a strange cookbook, claiming the queen insisted on this bread for dinner. Baker is so amazed by the ingredients that he completely ignores the stranger's ominous disappearance and prepares the bread. Out pops Loaf. Much like Geppetto, the newly named Papa Baker is pretty enthused to have a brand new son made out of bread and quickly goes about preparing to be a father. Oh, but that's not where this begins. No, it begins here in this tomb, where a trio of archaeologists awaken an ancient evil taking the form of 5 ghostly spirits seeking a power called the Sunstone Shard. I'm a big fan of the character designs and world here. The 5 future boss fights all look really cool and very distinct from each other while still adhering to a central theme. There's a real Shantae vibe from this style, big, bold, and very cartoony. The game plays with flat sprites running around a 3D environment, and it all feels very cohesive and easy to navigate. Oh yeah, the Sunstone. Well, you wave a flag in front of a bull, and what do you expect? However, this game is in dire need of some bug fixing. In the combat tutorial, the player is expected to have the sickle equipped. I misunderstood the rules, so I didn't have it when prompted. Soft lock and restart. Since there's no saving in the demo, I had to start from scratch. Later, while trying to figure out the character options, I lost the ability to change pages. I could close the journal, but couldn't do anything else with it. Given that we're in an RPG, a bug like that can entirely ruin the experience. Despite that, the rest of the game plays tight, looks good, and has plenty of lighthearted funny to spare, so I still have it on my favorites. Those problems shouldn't be hard to fix, and I'd hate to see so much promise sunk by them. Let's be realistic. It's easy to make a JRPG. So much so that there's a 20-year-old game engine just dedicated to that. You could make them on the PlayStation. 1. I feel for anyone trying to filter the wheat from the chaff when it comes to JRPGs, but I feel even more for anyone trying to make a game that stands out in this saturated genre. At first, I wasn't too impressed with In Stars in Time. It takes a bit to get going, the dialogue can be a little draggy. There are 5 characters in total, and they all like to have at least one word on whatever's being discussed, so little things like finding a potion can trigger 4 comments. The game starts in media res. Actually, I think it starts in Ultima res, because this has the feel of a final boss, and our characters are all level 46, and our black mage is casting level 3 spells. Sifrin is our main character, a fighter/spellcaster. We really need to bring back the term red mage, with a penchant for puns of middling quality. Mirabelle is our highly emotional healer, Isabeau is big and punches hard, Odile is our sarcastic intellectual who casts devastating spells. Oh, and there's Bonnie. Bonnie isn't a playable character, she's your inventory, a job she takes as seriously as a preteen can. Bonnie can't easily be worked into a strategy, but like a resist in Into the Breach, she's a random element that always works out in your favor. The narrative explanation is that Bonnie is too young to risk in combat, but too impulsive to completely keep out of it. Speaking of combat, you like rock, paper, scissors? Because the magic system, called Craft, is based on that. And I don't mean it's a dressed up RPS, I mean every enemy will be holding out a sign and it's up to you to match it with the correct weakness. Each character, enemy, and ability is tied to one of these elements, and as a result, interactions are easy to predict and plan around. Most characters even have the ability to give up their turn. Handy when your paper character is facing a scissors and you need to get Isabeau's rock in their face. Also, every turn a hand is thrown, and if all 5 come up the same, a combination attack occurs for free. There's actually a lot more to this system I like, but time presses. With only an hour of playtime, God these demos are long, I barely interacted with the game's signature system, time loops. We start at the end of the game, probably, but just when we're about to start the fight, Sifrin fails his detect trap check and learns the ways of the pancake. Then wakes up the day before. The trailer makes it clear this is a frequent occurrence, and if I didn't have so many demos to go through, I would have given it more time. But I have to cut it off somewhere, and even without exploring the time travel mechanic, In Stars in Time is one I'm watching. Okay, what? Okay, so I never played Earthbound. Most of my experience with the game is secondhand from videos about it or through games inspired by it. But I know there's a big touch of the zany to it, and games derived from that formula tend to catch it too. That said, more and more we're seeing games with a very clear Undertale inspiration, even if they're part of the Earthbound family tree. Athenian Rhapsody is taking the absurdity and running rampant with it. Knuckle Sandwich is far more grounded, while being about twice as insane. Instead of an abstract surrealscape, our main character, whose name is quickly rendered irrelevant, is a recent immigrant to Bright City and is looking for a job. After meeting some of the residents and slowly questioning the nature of existence, we end up in the city's unemployment office that doubles as a game show. After a string of successes and failures that turn out to be the same thing, we wind up as a server and busboy at a truly repulsive restaurant called Gorilla Burger. They serve soup. I'm not doing this game justice, because to do the demo justice would mean spoiling humor, twists, and the fact that Knuckle Sandwich can have multiple deeply concerning meanings. As JRPGs go, the combat is great, highly interactive, massively expanding on what Undertale started. There's no dialogue options in combat, so mercy is off the table. Standard attacks use a pair of moving bars to determine success and criticals. I think I could never figure out that little flashy bar. But that's only a piece of the puzzle. Timed dodges, bullet hells, shooters, QTEs, this game's combat system is a veritable arcade unto itself. And there are only like 2 fights in the whole demo. Did I mention there's a vampire bus driver who seems to know a lot more about what's going on and is also responsible for saving the game? Seems to be a relative of Sans. All I can say is it's going to be an interesting year for wacky RPGs. What do you mean you're getting all this honey and you only need 3? City builders and I don't often get along. I only played SimCity on my SNES because I'd already beaten Super Mario World into the ground and didn't have anything else to play at my grandparents' lake house. Also, I was 10. In theory, this should be my favorite genre, but I usually can't get into them. Why? Well, you see this tutorial set up for Laysara, Summit Kingdom? That's like 20 steps. I can't sit there putting things exactly where they're needed, being given exactly what is needed, for 20 steps without throwing the game down in annoyance. If you're going to make a game, just let me play it. And amazingly, Laysara does. Okay, yes, Laysara says build a marketplace, but critically it doesn't tell me where to build it. I am free, even in the tutorial, to screw this whole thing up. Better living through bad decisions. Next, build some houses. There's a minimum, but if you want to build more, go for it. Oh, you'll need a place for them to pray, just keep in mind the ranges and don't forget to build roads. And in case you screw up, here's the demolish tool. The peasants will get over it. There is definitely a step-by-step attitude towards Laysara's tutorial, but it quickly starts trusting your decisions and it never puts you on a leash. At one point, I was told to build 8 artisan homes. I found the cheesemaker tab and I started building them. Then I had to rearrange them because they weren't close enough to the market. Then again because they were too far from the yak shacks. Only when I finally had the whole yak to cheese operation up and running did I realize that the tutorial meant build artisan houses. Not workshops, not supply chains, houses. Done. 8 seconds. It never stopped me. Laysara's tutorial is not a separate part of the game. You're already playing. You just might not have noticed since you had directions, but you can go off script at any time. The resource system confused me a little bit. I was waiting to have gold or wood or stone introduced. Instead, Laysara lets you put down however many of whatever you want as long as you meet the preconditions. There's no currency in Laysara, unique from a lot of city builders I've played. But there is friction. Laysara is not a big place. There's room for several settlements, but square feet are at a premium and yaks do not tolerate overcrowding. You need to plan your layout. You need to establish trade routes. This game is far more about logistics than about construction. Apiaries can be built in a hurry, but can you get enough honey down the mountain to meet demand? By the time my hour with the demo finished, I was struggling to balance my production with my consumption with the never-ending demand for milk and wool, and I couldn't finish the tutorial. But I'm gonna. The yaks must flow. It's so nice to see, after decades of abandonment, that the Virtual Boy has finally gotten a brand new game to oh, it's just really red. So if you saw the trailer for Luna Abyss, you might be a little unclear on what this game actually is. I was expecting survival horror because there's a lot of red and body horror themed enemies. It's not though. It's kind of Doom 2016 by way of Toho, but with a stronger focus on narrative and atmosphere than demon slaying.
The Abyss has chosen a Fate Warden for you. I take it you must be from a working class background.
The trailers tell us we're a prisoner, but the demo doesn't really have that vibe, which is good because I don't have time for a third prison simulator in this mess. I'm already dealing with 2 Pinocchios. Instead, our main character wakes up unclear where they are or what happened to their body. The voice in our head, Aylin, isn't much help as she's mainly concerned with us doing a grand fetch quest into the depths of the Abyss. What that is, I don't know. We find records from previous scouts, that's what we are, a scout, and they don't tend towards happy endings. Combat is pretty fun. We only get 2 guns to play with in the demo, the rifle and the shield breaker, basically a rifle and shotgun but with extra utility, but they work great. Enemies are projectile-based and fire off bullet patterns for you to weave through and dodge around while trying to thin the numbers. It got tense a couple times. Smart players will use terrain to their advantage, though in the fight against the Celebrant there was a little too much advantage. There's also some NPCs roaming this place. We met a friendly scavenger sort doing his thing. Kind of a Soulsy vibe, lost souls in a dying world and all that.
No. I am a relic of different times.
Oh, and we knocked 10 days off our sentence, only 9,000 to go. We don't get too much revealed in the demo. There's some kind of church, probably evil. Also an AI, probably evil. Aylin seems like she might be evil. The demo was all dark corridors, but the trailers display open, bright-lit areas, so there should be variety to Luna Abyss's world, and I look forward to exploring it. You know, I wasn't going to do this one. It's been covered to death. It should go without saying that Lies of P is the standout winner of Steam NextFest 2023. They put out a long demo, which showed off a great spin on the Souls-like formula while playing in a steampunk version of... where does this take place? Crap? Is this fake Germany? Wasn't Pinocchio Italian? I don't know, but they had me at Pinocchio Souls-like, and the demo only gave more strength to the concept. I was only going to play 30 minutes of it because, unlike the others, I was already pretty sure I would like it. But I kept going because that's what this formula does to you. It makes you want to keep fighting until you press through somehow. Blow after blow, death after death, sooner or later this parade master is going to fall. I considered streaming the demo alone, but really is there any point? This thing is everywhere now. And for that matter, I don't really know Souls-like games. My closest attempts were Salt and Sanctuary and Blasphemous, but I never dug into the systems. All those stats are intimidating, they break the immersion for me as I try to figure out exactly what I need to be leveling and when. Watching Lemon's challenge runs on the backlogs reveals that these are incredibly deep systems with moving parts and hidden mechanics, and for me to really do Lies of P justice, I'd have to learn them. Which, who knows, might end up being a video unto itself. The release is still some months away, after all. Sometimes you just expect to love a game. Sea of Stars is the next game from Sabotage, the developer behind the excellent The Messenger, but instead of taking its cues from Ninja Gaiden, this time they're spinning off a game of Chrono Trigger. In Sea of Stars, you're given a trio of characters. Valir is a monk and tennis enthusiast who draws her power from the moon. Zale is a blade dancer who does not, as far as I can tell, dance and draws his power from the sun. Garl is a cook and the only one of the trio to bear any obvious scars. He draws his power from tomatoes. First things first, visually arresting. Sabotage have once again done their homework in visual design. Sea of Stars' world, even the overworld, is interesting to look at with visual flares that really make you wonder what's in store for you. This dragon isn't going to sleep for the whole adventure, right? Navigation involves finding ways through maze-like zones littered with enemies to fight. There are no random battles, thank RNGesus, but tight quarters can make them hard to avoid. And since battles garner XP, you really shouldn't be avoiding them too often. The game rewards exploration with treasures and rewards completion with shortcuts that hasten future trips. For all that, my adventure nearly died on the vine. After an arm wrestling match with a pirate that showcased Sabotage's trademark humor, we were charged with entering a secret wizard's lab. And I spent about 15 minutes running, swimming, and climbing around town trying to figure out where I was supposed to go and how I was supposed to get there, eventually having to watch a walkthrough for a demo. The problem is that the demo teleported us right into the bar, so I never saw the overworld map, so I didn't innately know how to get out of the town. Nor had I seen the sealed wall the lab was behind. I'm not sure many people were thusly struck, but a few playthroughs I watched had a bit of meandering at this point. It's the kind of thing that will not be a problem in the final product, so I really can't count against it. Combat is fantastic and varied. Each character can use timed hits to increase damage or decrease harm. There's also this interesting mechanic where a set of symbols appears above an enemy's head representing moon, sun, blunt, and sharp damage. Hit the enemy with each before their turn comes up and, well, I'm not entirely sure, but in the case of the bomb it got disarmed, so it's probably always a good thing, right? Anyhow, Sea of Stars was the only demo I let go more than an hour because I felt I had no choice but to finish it. So that should tell you all you need to know. It's a robot backwards. You got that, right? TOBOR's the last demo on my list of favorites. In it, you play a robot. Recently hired, built, it's unclear, to do surveillance on a crazy underground place. Look, this is one of those games where understanding the game is the game, so all I have to go on is what little I got in the 2-day demo. In TOBOR, you start your day, pick a subject to follow, and then record whatever you learn. You're forbidden from interacting with them, but I strongly suspect that the option to do so will be in the final product. There's a don't feed the monkeys vibe there, even if the tone is completely perpendicular. The residents of the Undercroft are... crazy? I got the impression there's a whole civilization down here, but there are no generic NPCs. If the central characters aren't talking to each other, they're talking to robots and vermin. Despite that, they seem to wield power belying their grim and dank circumstances. One is seen ordering executions, while another communes with some angelic power. A third runs a news program for the residents. It's entirely possible this is some kind of prison for a set of very powerful, very insane beings who are being kept away from the world at large. But we're not all that sane ourselves. We're already in a dire situation. If the corporation that owns our contract gets upset, they can kill us. In fact, they would have already, except policy forbids killing employees on their first day. I still don't know what, if anything, I did wrong. There's almost no chance, calculated as 0.03%, that the corporation will come rescue us even if we do finish our jobs. And we've had some very strange dreams lately. Dreams which have an impact on the waking world. We might be in one of those what is real situations, I'm not sure. And that's the whole point. So there you have it, my favorite of the NextFest demos. A lot of games caught my interest this time around. I gave them all a fair shot, but I only brought my favorites for your viewing. They all represented either unique concepts, impressive gameplay, expert craftsmanship, or a mix of all three. From where I'm sitting, the future looks bright over the gaming landscape. Thanks for playing, everyone.